Bruntz, would you agree?
Oh, Lord.
That getting Keona Davis back out of the portal is a big deal?
Big deal. Yes, I agree.
Bigger deal.
I see what kind of mood you're in. Okay, here we go.
Thought he might elaborate there a bit. I get it.
Oh,
I get it wasn't an A+ question, Bruntsy. I thought you might help me out.
Oh, Lord.
Mustang to Mustang. I thought you might throw me a bone there.
I'm just telling you, Brunsy, he's been on a tear this whole week, so nobody's safe.
I've seen the clips. I'm going to tread carefully here. I was just watching that first pitch. I wasn't going up there swinging. So I think, no, it's a big deal. And I think when you, I don't know, like, I don't know if you guys are the same. I've shared this with Damon, I think, off air. But as things have kind of gone along, with each defensive lineman that's hit the portal, you're kind of doing like that mental, or at least I was, the kind of like mental depth chart of what a Nebraska defensive line is going to look like in New York City.
Yeah.
And it was getting a little bit rough, a little bit sparse, especially with some of the younger guys for next year. So it's a big deal because I think he was somebody that, I'm trying to think when it really kind of started to pop a little bit. Maybe like start of November, like right after the bye.
That's safe.
Even where he was more, he was in there more than some of the veteran guys that are now in the portal looking for new homes. So it was only a total of like 90 snaps, I think, is what Pro Football Focus had him for the year. But just in terms of like, you kind of want that freshman trajectory for a guy to kind of start clicking and figuring it out a little bit in November. And it seemed like that was kind of the track that he was on. And, he's got a Big Ten body. You could see where with another, a true off season where, you could add, 20 pounds of good weight and be, somebody that can be like a, 20, 30 snap guy next year. So that was a big, I don't know if what are we calling those, saves?
Retention?
Yeah, that's good. That was a good retention piece for Nebraska.
So was Emmett a hold or?
I don't know.
He never actually made it to the portal.
I think he was a hold opportunity.
You can't lose what was never in the portal, right?
Yeah.
Is that how that saying goes?
So the cool thing though, and I mean this just because I'm a huge EJ guy personally, and I know a little bit of the backstory with Keona Davis, right? I know his parents just got to Lincoln, and that whole thing was kind of awkward in terms of how it came about. But to land the plane, we're talking about guys that it's not necessarily about money. It's about assurances that you're kind of for me going forward. Like you value me, I'm in the deal. How much of that is a sentiment you think Nebraska can grow and win with, especially as it seems like that's what they're gravitating towards on the recruiting trail as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of an attitude, is how you're if you're Matt Rhule, you're going to have that kind of developmental program that you want in an age where everybody's moving. You know what I mean? So, I think getting those guys back are with that kind of a mindset are really important, and you can build around those guys because if we're basically just going to have annual free agency in college football, if guys feel good about what you're doing and valued, I mean, it's kind of talking through it. It's almost kind of like you don't want to use the word, but it's like almost like making sure that like employees are valued.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And again, that's not what we're talking about here, but
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Technically.
So, but I mean I think that's an important, for some guys, that's a pretty important part of the conversation too. And I don't know, my sense with Keona, and I might be speaking out of school here, but I think, you know, he's a Western United States guy. He was recruited by Tony White, you know, coached by Terrence Knight. You probably just needed to make sure that everybody was on the same page given the movement that's taken place over the last couple of weeks.
So let's talk movement, Bruntz. Like, you're pretty pragmatic, so maybe this doesn't move your needle, but were you surprised that there was kind of this open effort from former staff to grab guys to go with them?
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess kind of given how it happened coming here, that, you know, that played out a little bit differently, I think. I don't know. I mean, I'll also be kind of curious to see kind of where everybody ends up when the dust settles.
That's what they better be careful of, because I'm with you on that.
Because it's not my sense that it's everybody that's entered the portal is going to necessarily go to the same place. Like, I think
100%.
I think there's some, you know, some people that will probably end up where you expect them to end up, you know, in North Florida. But, you know, I also think there's going to be a lot of guys that were part of that crew that went into the portal that are going to be playing their college football next year elsewhere, just because I don't know. I mean, it's not, you know, everybody's got the 105 problem, right? Like, you know, you can't just take a huge group of guys into a school like that, especially one where they did sign some defensive linemen, and you know, that's the reality is that, you know, you can probably take a couple of them, but I don't think it's going to be this mass exodus straight to one place.
Bruntz, you mentioned the defensive line depth for the bowl game and that doing sort of a mental depth chart on that. What's your level of concern for the defensive line depth next season? Or is it hey, you kind of need to wait and see, obviously, what happens in the portal? But I guess I'm asking, how important is it to you that they do get some players in that group from the portal?
Oh, it's important. I mean, it's really important. You know, when you kind of we've seen what a defense the last couple of years can look like when you have old guys up front. I mean, I think that's the recipe that Nebraska used the last couple of years. I think is a pretty good one along the defensive line. I mean, kind of the mix of pieces. You know, having just a big, you know, 23-year-old big ass Ty Robinson in the middle. You've seen the benefits of that. I mean, I don't know if there's that type of player in the portal right now, but I mean, that's one area, you know, on a roster where I think you need to have a pretty nice mix of old guys and developmental guys. And that's why, you know, also just getting Keona Davis back is so big, because I think he was one of the guys that you would point to and say, like, okay, this is kind of the youngish next guy up type player. And now I think you just need to backfill a little bit with guys who are, you know, 1 year kind of mercenary types, or even 2 year guys to kind of, you know, try to give you help right now, because Nebraska's going to need it. I mean, you know, you need a solid 2 deep in the Big Ten to be able to function well as a defense. And you know, we've seen the good and the bad of that at Nebraska in past years, where if you don't have the depth, or you're relying on just 1 or 2 guys to do everything for you, you're going to have a really rough season, and it's going to be really tough for you when November rolls around.
Bruntz, maybe this isn't super novel, but I'm curious to get your thoughts. It's kind of like this little bit of consternation over kind of the naming of coordinators and who was available, and just the reaction. And I kind of likened it to this, and this is in my own head, because I was trying to explain to Ravi and our listening audience kind of what I felt like Snow could do for Butler if you had doubts on his ability to immediately relate to young people as a coordinator. And the example that I would use today is like a sandwich, right? if you like if you like your veggies at, this place, and I like the meat from this place, and Ravi likes the cheese from this place, but nobody's like the overall great sandwich maker. Could you see Nebraska putting their staff together like that, where you may not have the ideal sandwich place, but you can get the best ingredients from each of the said restaurants?
Yeah. Let me wrap my head around this metaphor here. So,
well, you get the aptitude and the versatility of scheme with Butler. You get kind of the cohesiveness, and the Snow's not a he doesn't blink. He's a good communicator. You get the youthful exuberance of Dvorak. You get, what I mean? It's just like,
yeah, no, I get it. It's well, and that's the with the change in rules too. Like, it feels like staffs are going to be put together differently than maybe what they have been in the past.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you don't necessarily need your coordinator to be a lights out dynamic recruiter all the time. I mean, you'll take that if you can get it, but I mean, you have other guys on staff that can do that kind of thing. I mean, I think you can hire assistant coaches that are a little bit more of with more of an eye to the kind of like being able to relate to players in a different way versus maybe a different kind of strength. The other thing too, I mean, this defensive staff is not done. Like there's still things being done there, but when the stuff came out the other day, the addition of Phil Snow was probably the one that I was most intrigued by, and kind of how that was going to function, because you have the title of associate head coach, but you've got somebody that's done this for a long time in the room, being part of those discussions. I mean, I'm imagining it being a little bit more of a collaborative effort on that side of the ball. And I think that's okay. I mean, obviously John Butler's got tons of experience. He doesn't have a ton of coordinating experience, and that's where you can have the strengths, I guess, or the different pieces of the sandwich to make that work. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's really important though that people really kind of understand though that this, how novel this rule change was last year. I mean, you've got guys on staff that can go out and recruit and have ties to certain areas. Jamar Mosey, Keith Williams. I mean, that getting those guys to be able to go on the road for you while you have very veteran coordinators and assistant coaches kind of back, scheming and working on the X's and O's piece of it. I mean, it's almost, a lot more specialized than, what it's ever been in college football that way.
We're talking with Michael Bruntz, Husker247. Bruntz, obviously we've been talking about the defensive staff a lot. One of the guys that has kind of gone under the radar a little bit because of all the talk about John Butler is the defensive line coach hire from the Kansas City Chiefs in Braden. How has that moved the needle for you?
I'm intrigued. It's a little bit out of the past kind of assistant hiring playbook that Matt Rhule's done, with a little bit more experience. I mean, from talking to people in South Florida, I mean, he's a well-known name down there for a long time, has been seen as a rising star in the industry. And I don't know, I mean, as much as I hate to, admit this or say this out loud, I think there's probably a little bit of a magic right now to having the Kansas City Chiefs on your resume. So,
and it's got to be tough for the Bronco fan.
It's hard. It sucks a lot. But I mean that when you talk about like this is as far as I'm going to go with this. But I mean, when you talk about franchises recently that seem to have kind of figured out how to do things at a high level, I mean, there's not many that are doing it higher than they are. So, I'm eager to kind of see, what he can do recruiting wise. Kind of going back to the question earlier about the defensive line. I mean, that group is going to need to be restocked and developed in a pretty significant way. So there's a lot of work to do there, but from what, just asking around about him and things like that, I mean, I think there's a lot of excitement in the right places about that hire and kind of what he can do potentially for Nebraska.
Bruntz, how much of your experience, especially your recollection because of your memory, but I mean, you remember the whole Knighton thing and, is he going to be a position coach? I thought he was going to be an analyst, and, will the 3-3-5 work defensively, and then the hand wringing. And, we just totally glossed over that now we have an outside linebackers coach in addition to Dvorak, but because we like Simpson, we didn't parse through that really. It's just like, he's on staff, don't care what he does. Does your experience just allow you to ride the wave of all the kind of the feedback and knee-jerk reactions because you understand so well that you just have to wait it out?
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I meant earlier. I mean, they're not done hiring. And just kind of the fact that you don't just have 10 set on-field assistant coaches anymore, it gives you a lot of flexibility to bring guys on and kind of have them handle different roles. I mean, it's Nebraska last year had a guy, in Jack Potenza coaching Jacks that they trusted a lot. This feels like a little bit of a fill in there. I mean, and then it's kind of like, okay, well, is he an analyst? Is he a coach? Like, what are we calling these guys? There's a lot of fluidity there now. And so, I want to see, if what a defensive backs hire looks like. What else they potentially add as the analysts go, because they had some defensive analysts leave with Tony White, or leave at the same time as Tony White, I guess. So that kind of needs to shake out a little bit. But I don't get as largely kind of hamstrung over roles and titles now as what it used to be. I mean, the thing that's important now are who are your 10 assistant coaches that you're sending out on the road, and that's kind of a bigger piece of it to me almost than what if a guy is going to be an analyst or whatever. So we'll see how it shakes out. We also haven't heard from Matt Rhule yet and kind of what his vision looks like on that side of the ball, because the last time we heard from him, it was we're talking a lot of Power 4 coordinators and all this other stuff, and all of a sudden the dust has very quickly settled, and you've got kind of the structure, I guess, of a defensive staff. So we'll see what he says today, but I think you probably want the whole picture before you kind of start really taking a look at what this is going to look like and how it might function.
Bruntz, you mentioned a couple times you don't think they're done hiring. You mentioned defensive backs coach. Is there anywhere else you think they might be, that you'd be looking to add some help if you were putting the staff together or continuing to put the staff together?
I don't know. I mean, and I guess that's why, titles are kind of what they are. I mean, I don't know if you're able to bring somebody in as, more of an analyst and you kind of figure out what their role is. I'm kind of curious to see if they do anything there. I mean, it's the Matt Rhule coaching tree is actually, I think a little bit bigger than what people realize for a coach that's, just turning 50. So
it's huge.
And so
plus he's well liked.
Yeah, well, and not only that, but I mean, you've got an offensive coordinator who has been a head coach at multiple places, who has his connections and his guys that have been various places that are possibilities. And so, I think there's going to be a pretty hard look at where they can get help. I mean, we haven't really talked much about special teams and if, what's going to happen there, if there's any changes coming there. So I think I don't think the carousel is done spinning yet. and you know, we're 2 weeks into December here, and there's a lot of time before spring ball. So I would definitely not think that they're done with you know, making hires. And also, I mean, there's also openings elsewhere and guys potentially looking to move on as well. So there's a lot of work to be done there.
Yeah, I just get the sense, Bruntz, I can narrow it down to like a handful of states. Somebody within the 500-mile radius, somebody with Florida connections, and somebody with Texas connections, right? They're starting to establish where they want to recruit. So I would imagine that the guys that they were potentially thinking about bringing would have something to do with one of those three things.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting though, like where in Texas too, right? Like,
oh yeah, yeah.
With some of the
East Texas is different than Dallas, is different than Houston.
Certainly different than West Texas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you've got programs in that state now too, like SMU, that are recruiting with their elbows out and their checkbooks open. So I think there is a little bit of a recalibrating of maybe where Nebraska's choosing to focus recruiting wise right now.
I'm stunned that SMU is recruiting with their checkbook open.
Legally now.
As far as we know, there are some things that are still not legal. We know this. Bruntz, we appreciate the time as always. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, take care, guys.